Welcome to the Suitcase and the Scribe with award-winning journalist Scott Burnside and former NHL goaltender Mike McKenna, a member of the Nation Network of podcasts and delivered by DoorDash.
Hey everybody, Scott Burnside back with my good pal Mike McKenna for this week's edition of the Suitcase and the Scribe. Mike, you are looking fabulous. You look like a guy who saw actual live hockey last night. And how exciting is it to be sitting here talking about the actual start of the 21-22 NHL season?
Well, are you insinuating that I've got bags under my eyes and I was up late watching the Vegas game? Because if that's the case, well, it's actually true. I did put a little makeup on today, but, it's just, we have this whole buildup getting ready for a season. And as a player, it's different because you've got training camp, you've got summer skates, the things that just come naturally to you. But for us now in media, which I guess I'm a media person, but it's just different. You're finding things to talk about. You're trying to figure out who's going to be good, who's not. And then it all goes out the window the first game of the year. And something happens like the Penguins beat the Tampa Bay Lightning, the reigning champions. Who expects that to happen? It's just one game, but that's what makes us so exciting. It's nice to wake up and have live action to talk about and to look at your smiling face and be ready to go for episode 2 of the Suitcase and the Scribe.
So I'm curious. I mean, I thought there was lots to talk about with those two games. As you mentioned, Pittsburgh upsetting the defending champs. Yeah. Still looked a little bit hungover from the Stanley Cup in their performance. And then, of course, the first ever Seattle Kraken game in Vegas against their expansion brethren. But I want to ask you first, Mike, because I think about this, and we're fortunate. Later in the show, we're going to have Minnesota Wild GM Bill Guerin join us, also the assistant GM of Team USA for the 2022 Olympics in Beijing. And I'm curious to see how Bill feels about this too. But as a player, do you have specific moments from an opening night? I don't care where it was, what team, like, were there moments that stuck with you from that opening night of a particular season? Because it strikes me that everything is equal, right? I don't care whether you're supposed to win or not. That moment on the ice, everything is equal, and it truly is a blank slate. And I wonder if you have special memories from any opening nights of your own.
I do. And I'll preface this by saying I was never on an opening night roster in the NHL, unfortunately. So I don't have those experiences. But I think that anybody who's played the game at any level with fans in the building can tell you that there's a certain buzz and a certain atmosphere when you skate out for that first game of the season. There's always pyro. Maybe there's a guest celebrity dropping the puck, our local legend. It's, this guy's the best car salesman in Springfield, Massachusetts. Let's wheel him out to drop the puck or something like that. I mean, it's got a palpable buzz to it, and I think that winning that first game is really just so important. You can carry momentum out of that first game so easily. And on the conversely to that, like, it's so hard to keep your mind out of the gutter if you don't play well that first game. First impressions are everything. It's just like walking into an office where you want to walk in and put your best foot forward and let everybody know, hey, I'm here to work. I'm here to impress. And what's funny is, like, even last night, Scott, digging into these games, I'm watching the Kraken play, and Philip Grubauer, who I think is an excellent goaltender, I could tell he was pressing. He's a little bit outside of his crease. And, at times the Kraken looked like they were, a little disjointed, which is expected for an expansion team, for a bunch of guys that haven't played together. But I think a lot of that could really just be chalked up to the amount of energy that they had leading into the game. It's easy to go overboard with it. On the flip side of that, we look at Tampa Bay, who looked like they were sleepwalking a little bit, especially compared to Pittsburgh, who came out. First period, Pittsburgh put 14 shots on goal. They were flying. Vasilevsky makes a miscue behind the net that you don't usually see. So it was an interesting night from that standpoint, but I think a lot of it does go to the nerves associated with that opening night and just trying so hard. You want to win so bad. And sometimes you forget, hey, you've played this game for 20 something years. Dial it back, play your game, you're good to go. But our mind always takes over.
I remember my memory is after the 2012 lockout, and we started the 48 game schedule early in 2013. And I think I was in Philly to start the season. I think the Flyers played the Penguins to start the season, but the very first game, I believe, was the defending Stanley Cup champion LA Kings against the Chicago Blackhawks. And again, my memory, I should have looked this up, but Blackhawks win that game. And I don't think it mattered to the Kings as nearly as much as it mattered to the Blackhawks. And the Blackhawks got off to just an absolutely torrid start. And I remember talking to Patrick Sharp and Patrick Kane after about just, starting the season on that high note, and, whatever they ran 23 games or whatever, they had just an incredible start. And of course, ended up winning the Stanley Cup later that spring or summer, beating Boston in the final. But that start was key for the Blackhawks. And I'm not suggesting Pittsburgh are going to go on that kind of roll, but my sense is that game probably meant a little bit more to Pittsburgh, Tampa, just given their dynamics.
Well, especially missing players. You look at Crosby and Malkin are out of the lineup. Gensel's not in. There's an awful lot of firepower that wasn't in the lineup for Pittsburgh. They knew they had to play a team game. They knew they had to play fast. And Tristan Jarry looked good. And I think that's a big variable for the Pittsburgh Penguins this year is how Jarry responds. Last year wasn't great. Playoffs were a disaster.
Yeah.
Andy Chiodo's the goalie coach there now. Chiodo was Jarry's coach in the minors. They had a great relationship. You wonder how that's going to play. I wasn't very high on their goaltending tandem. I wrote an article for Daily Faceoff that came out yesterday saying they were pretty far down my list in terms of tandems, but I do think that there's potential that they can jump up. Jarry has those intangibles. But man, how about Jeff Carter? Here's a guy you pick up last year, you throw him in, you're thinking, how's this contract going to play out? Well, you're seeing the value of him being in the lineup at this point. And, Scott, my favorite moment last night, and I wonder the same for you. And I want to ask you, what went through your mind when you saw Brian Boyle score right off the bat?
Oh my God. I think I was like a lot of people. I filled with that kind of joy that comes from an opportunity realized, and a person, to whom good things are happening once again. And it's been, he didn't play at all last year, played in the Worlds. I'm fortunate. I had a chance when Brian Boyle got traded from New Jersey to Nashville, got a chance to meet him at the airport with the Brandon Walker, the Preds team services guy, hung out with Brian, talked to his wife. It was a crazy story. His son had some health problems, and his wife was taking him to a specialist in Boston, I believe. And he called to say, by the way, when you get home, I won't be here. I'm going to Nashville. But just his presence in locker rooms, I don't care whether it's been in Tampa or Toronto, wherever he's been, Brian Boyle is a leader. And you wonder, was it at the end of the road for a guy who has meant a lot to a lot of teams? And he goes on a PTO, finds out the day before, if I'm not mistaken, that he's got a place in the Penguins lineup. And you alluded to a number of the injuries or absences for the Penguins to start with. And he takes full advantage, scores a nice 5-hole goal, really to help the Penguins solidify their lead in that game. I don't know. What went through your mind?
Just smiling. This is somebody that across the sport is really loved. And it's not just that he's come back from cancer. He missed an entire season of hockey last year. He didn't have a contract, and he did what he needed to stay in the game. And you just don't see people come back like this. I remember a couple of years ago with Dallas, RJ Umberger shows up. He had been out of the game for a year. He had a pretty good training camp. He thought he'd give it one more kick at the can, and there was no space for him. Yeah. And it's really out of sight, out of mind in this game. And I think it really speaks to Brian Boyle, how he's thought of within the sport. And not just that he can bring intangible on the ice, but this is a guy you want to have in your locker room. And realistically, Pittsburgh knows that when Crosby, when Malkin, when Guentzel, when they're back, maybe Brian Boyle's out of the lineup, but he's still in the NHL. And when injuries hit yet again, it's a guy you can put right at. He knows how to handle this situation, and he's still, Stanley Cups are enticing. Pittsburgh may not have been picked by everybody to be a true contender this year, but you can never count that team out at full strength. When they're healthy again, we don't know what to expect out of them. So it's interesting. And we've already talked about it too, about big names being absent, Scott. And there's quite a few around the league. I mean, think about Backstrom's out in Washington, McKinnon on the COVID list. Carey Price is in the player assistance program. Not sure if or when he may come back this year. So, like, Scott, from your standpoint, what teams are you looking at in terms of the injuries and players out that it's going to make life difficult on them?
Yeah, and the list is significant, and the list of significant players is long. And Evander Kane, for instance, still under investigation by the league, and what will happen with him in San Jose. There's a lot of stuff going on with Evander Kane, both on and off the ice in his life. So how does that get resolved? I'm curious, whether, I think it's still uncertain whether Alex Ovechkin will play in their opener against the Rangers. I didn't like. It was an awkward hit, and it looked to me like he was trying to hold up a bit on a hit that would have been from behind, but he sort of looked like he twisted something. And, to me, when we talk about his potential assault on Wayne Gretzky's goal record and his new contract in Washington, I think we've all looked at Ovechkin as there's a strong possibility he can, sort of do the unthinkable and catch or pass Wayne Gretzky's goal record, because he's been so durable and has stayed so healthy.
That's a key point. He just hasn't missed hockey games.
Yeah. Well, and he plays the same way now, more or less, than he did when he came in 05-06, which is, is so much fun. To me, it's what makes him so much fun. But that would, that's a big red flag. And Nicholas Backstrom with a hip injury, a long-term injury now, that's a real concern there. You go to the Leafs, Austin Matthews won't play in the first week. So let me ask you, do you think because the first week is often really fluid and guys are, still finding their footing? I'm with you. I thought Philip Grubauer looked a little tense in his first game. He's going to be better. How much stock do you put in what happens in the first couple of weeks? And does it allow a team that might be missing? I expect Sidney Crosby will be back sooner than later. Certainly Jake Gensel is expected back sooner than later. Is it better to be missing now than in the middle of November or the middle of January? Does it always suck when you're missing them? Doesn't matter.
Scott, I think it really matters about the past precedence of your team and the team makeup. I think if you're looking at Pittsburgh, it's a team that has had success relatively recently and enough bodies that are still there to know how to power through things. They can still look to the reinforcements coming with Crosby and Malkin, but even look at Philly with Hayes being out for a while. If they don't start off well in Philly, I worry about that team. That didn't end well there last year. I just think that teams that have experience of winning can miss players and keep it rolling much easier than the teams that haven't had it previously, no matter what, because when you walk into the season, you're always thinking, this is it. This is our year. We're better. We can contend. Even the worst teams in the league think they can make the playoffs. If they catch lightning in a bottle. I guarantee you the guys sitting in Arizona right now are going, screw you to everybody in this world. We're going to make playoffs. We're going to prove everybody wrong. And I love that, because you never know who's going to be the underdog story. Somebody will be this year. We don't know who it'll be, but somebody will. And I think even let's go with Tampa. They don't have players missing like the other clubs, but if they go 2-8 to start the season, I'm not concerned about them.
Yeah.
I don't think it matters. They know that they're going to be there at the end. Now, if they get into Christmas time and they're out of the mix, it's a different story. But let's take Pittsburgh or Washington. If you're Washington, you go 2-10 to start 2-8 to start the year.
Yeah.
I think they're in big trouble.
Yeah.
I think that team's more fragile than people may realize. They haven't really done much since they won the cup. The team's largely stayed the same. I may have concerns about Washington. I think some of the other clubs can handle it better.
Yeah. I'm curious. And when we talk about players who are absent for an indefinite period of time, and one of those teams that I don't think the Ottawa Senators are quite ready yet, although I think under DJ Smith, they've taken strides forward. There's a lot of really, I think, promising young pieces there, and it's a hungry team, and that fan base certainly has been hungry for some success now over the past 4 or 5 years. But without Brady Tkachuk there and the contract impasse, is that different than an injury in terms of the dynamic in the dressing room? So if somebody's hurt, whether it's a Backstrom or whatever it is, how different is it than a healthy player who should be in your roster, but can't come to terms with the team, does it change the dynamic at all in that dressing room?
It's different. When somebody's injured, that's out of your control. When a player isn't signed, there's animosity back towards the team because they haven't signed your friend, your teammate, the person that you look at to carry your club. And that's Brady Tkachuk.
Yeah.
In a perfect world, Brady Tkachuk's locked up on an 8-year deal for big money, and he's the captain of the team. And he hasn't been given something that makes him want to sign that. Whether it's structure, whether it's bonus money, whatever's going on there, it hasn't happened. And that could drag out clear until the end of November, I could see at this point. If you miss the first game, what does it matter if you sit out longer? And then everybody in the locker room starts looking around going, come on, management, get this done. What's going on here? And I think that even when players know that a teammate might be reaching a little bit in terms of contract demands, there's still that thought of, we need to get this done, guys. We're a team here, and it's taxing on people. But it does flip back to the team more so than the players in my eyes there. And that's not a good scenario. It's not healthy. You want to have everybody on the same page pulling together. And I even look at Kirill Kaprizov, that signing in Minnesota. I think that was more money than Minnesota probably wanted to spend, but you got to keep that player. You have to keep that player. And that resonates through the locker room. We're going to try to win. This is it. I think there's validity to that. And we look at not just players at this point, but let's flip this, Scotty. Let's look at coaches. There's teams out there that need a hot start. How about the coaches? I look at Rick Bowness in Dallas. Everybody loves Bones. They love playing for him. He's on the last year of his contract. They didn't make playoffs last year. They were ravaged by COVID to start the season. I expect Dallas to be better. On paper, that's an outstanding team. They got a log jam in net. I'm not sure how that's going to play out. But I think for Rick Bowness' sake, it's got to start well there, because I do believe there's a hot seat. And I think that, you look at the Rangers, even Gerard Gallant comes in, and this is a big signing for the Rangers. You bring in somebody who's had success previously with the Panthers, with Vegas. He's done great things with new teams coming in afresh. I think there's a lot of pressure on Gerard Gallant and on the Rangers in general. Scotty, who do you see across the league that might be sitting on that hot seat?
Yeah, well, I was thinking about Sheldon Keefe in Toronto, and even though there's been an extension, which I thought was critical. There are certain guys, and I think we may have touched on Dave Tibbett last week. There are certain coaches, and I think Rick Bowness is probably in that boat as well. When you get to a certain stage in your career, it probably matters less if you are in the final year of your deal. You probably have a relationship with a GM or an owner or an organization where you know where you stand, and there's a certain sort of zen about it. At least that's how I project it. I don't think anything is zen in Toronto, and I thought
is it ever? I don't know if it ever is.
Never. Well, that's a function. If you decide, or if you are in a situation where you haven't won a playoff round since before the 04-05 lockout, I'm sorry, you don't get to be zen. And when you are coming off a playoff series in a playoff year where you absolutely choked away a golden opportunity to go at least to a Final Four, and possibly a Stanley Cup final, and you are up 3-1 against a very, listen, I'm not throwing Montreal on the bus, but that was a pretty ordinary team, and you're up 3-1 and you can't close the deal. Then I'm sorry. Then you deserve to be on the hot seat. Now he's got the extension. That whole organization, to me, and my sense of Brendan Shanahan as the president there, he takes on a lot of the responsibility, as he should. I think my sense is that he has said, listen, the buck stops with me. But this season is so critical for the Leafs, and it doesn't matter. Notwithstanding not making the playoffs altogether, but I think they're a playoff team. They should score lots. Still not sure on that in the goaltending, but they should be a playoff team. But it doesn't matter if there are 62 wins. It doesn't matter if they go in as a wild card team. All that matters is what happens starting the first round of the playoffs next spring. And that's hard. That's a hard way to coach, I think, because you have to keep the focus on the here and now, when all anyone wants is what's going to happen when the rubber hits the road in the playoffs next spring. And I'm going to ask you, do you think that does that change how especially a younger coach like Sheldon Keefe, that maybe he approaches the game, or what the challenge is, knowing that the focus has to be here, but everyone else is thinking already till next April?
I've had the chance to play against Sheldon Keefe a fair amount in my career and at the American League level, and played him twice, his team, when he was coaching the Toronto Marlies in playoffs. And the first year when I was with the Syracuse Crunch, we beat them in 7 games. And it was a dogfight of a series, and that team was so good. And it's because the Marlies have twice the payroll of just about every other American League team a lot of the time, especially back then. They were stashing one-way contracts, and it was a little bit of a different game in terms of the playing field. But then the second year, lost to them in Game 7 of the Calder Cup Finals. And I look at that as a learning moment for Sheldon Keefe and his projection as a coach, in that team should have won both years. That team should win every year. The Marlies is who I'm speaking of. With who they put on the ice, the amount of money that they invest in it, the Marlies should win the Calder Cup every year in the American Hockey League. And it was a big disappointment to lose to our Syracuse team that first year for the Marlies. They knew they had a great club. And he took that and improved his team the next season. He got them over the hump, and he continued to press forward. And I think also the show that's just come out recently with the Leafs, Looking Inside, that's on Amazon. I can't remember the name of it, unfortunately, right now, but I think it just showed
all in or something like that.
Yeah, all in on the Leafs.
All in except for games 5, 6, and 7.
Yes. But I think it showed a bit of the inside of the mentality of how Keefe works. I'm impressed by him. I don't think that job security is something that he's shooting for. I think that winning is what he's shooting for. And I think that permeates through to Kyle Dubas as well. I had this conversation 2 years ago with somebody in media talking about how, well, this is the NHL, is what I was told about Kyle Dubas. That basically he doesn't have the guts to make a bold decision in the NHL. And he fired Mike Babcock the next day. And I had said that this guy has a track record of doing these things in Sault Ste. Marie and Toronto. Kyle Dubas isn't in Toronto to put a good team on the ice and go have fun and wine and dine people. And he's not scared. People might look at him and see a diminutive young man who doesn't look like he's an imposing figure. He doesn't have Mark Bergevin guns and can't bench press 400 pounds. But he's a very intelligent person who knows what it takes to at least put a team together that's going to be able to compete and make adjustments as necessary. Now, I do think they should place more of a premium on goaltending, but I think that's partially due to the fact that they haven't developed anybody from within.
Right.
That's the key. You can't just go out and buy a goaltender that's going to win you a Stanley Cup. It hasn't happened in over a decade. So I know I've gone on a bit of a tangent here with the Leafs. I know people appreciate that conversation probably, but I just think that Keefe's on the right track with this. And I think that across the league, coaches should be coaching to win, not for job security. When you get into thinking about your job, you might as well quit.
Yeah. So before we leave the Leafs, are they a playoff lock for you? That Atlantic division, to me, again, I don't think Ottawa is quite ready to jump up. But boy, the top end of that with Tampa, Florida, Boston, Toronto, with Carey Price away from the team and missing Shea Weber, I know Mike Hoffman's he's not quite ready to go yet. There's a lot of moving parts to what's going on to a team that went to a Stanley Cup final, but Montreal's in the mix. Are the Leafs a lock, or what do you think?
To me, I think they're still a lock. That team's just too good. It does hurt missing Zach Hyman. Yeah. He was really a driver for a lot of what happened on that club in terms of all-around game. I like the Leafs, though. I liked them last year. It's just that they fell apart at the wrong time. Bringing in people like Spezza and Simmons, those guys know their role. They know they're not going to be playing first, second line minutes, but they're there to win. And I still think the back end could use some help. And obviously the goaltending gives me big question marks. And unfortunately for Peter Mrazek, it's always been the question, can you win in playoffs with him? It's always dogged him wherever he's been. Yeah. And Jack Campbell's performance last year, which I do not blame him for that loss at all. It's one bad goal, but one bad goal can haunt you in a city like Toronto. And Campbell doesn't have the track record of playing big time minutes yet. I just think there's question marks there. And again, it's just because they're so top heavy, but I do think they're a lock. When you got, I mean, Matthews is going to score 60 this year, if he's healthy. Between him and if Marner can manage to find the net in the postseason, I mean, we know in the regular season you can. So I think the Leafs are, but man, that division is stacked. You're right, Scott. Like who else do you think could be a sleeper in that division?
Yeah, I think it's too soon for Detroit. Although
they're going to be better. They're going to surprise.
They are going to be better, and I'm really curious to see how Alex Nedeljkovic does in Detroit after the Canes decided he wasn't a guy they felt they could go deep in the playoffs with, rightly or wrongly. And I do think Ottawa. I do think Brady Tkachuk gets things resolved. At some point, it makes no sense for a player and team that one of your top one or two players is not playing. So I do think it happens. And I think the Senators are going to push. To me, the question is Montreal, if they put pressure on those other teams, if Jake Allen is going to be able to hold the fort until Carey Price comes back, when we don't know when that will be exactly. I do like the blue line there. I like the addition of Dvorak, who I think more than adequately replaces Kotkaniemi, who of course was given the offer sheet and is in Carolina now with all the other Finnish players in the NHL.
And the teams are still trolling one another on social media.
Yes, I still love that. Yeah. So to me, that's the wild card in the Atlantic. And to me, the whole, because then you have to break it down a little bit further. If you're going to send, are you sending 4 teams from the Atlantic, or is it possible that the 5th team comes into play, which would be Montreal, I think. But is Montreal going to be better than the 4th place team in the Metro, which is a division I think is really in a state of flux? That'd be the question. What do you make of Montreal? I mean, it almost feels like that trip to the Stanley Cup final happened to, like in another universe. It seems like it happened a million years ago.
Yeah, I have Montreal as a playoff team. I think they're going to make it in, whether it's as a 4 or as a number 5. I think they make it. I have concerns about Boston.
Yeah.
And it seems crazy because they've been so good for so long. That top line of Pasternak, Marchand, and Bergeron is unbeatable. But they've just been gradually chipping away pieces. Tuukka Rask isn't there. Linus Ullmark's got great upside. He's played great for Buffalo, but he's never played more than 35 games, 40 games. He's been hurt a ton. Jeremy Swayman has lit the world on fire from junior to college to the American League and the NHL. But for 10 games in the NHL, it's a hard place to thrive as a number 1 goaltender. I'm not sure where Boston stands. Their blue line, I don't think is as strong as it's been previously. I think it's going to hurt not having David Krejci any longer. I've talking to players, I'm not sure that it's always warm and fuzzy there. I have a gut feeling that if there's a top team that could fall from grace, Boston's one of them. And I think Washington too. But Boston to me is a team that I'd really look for in that division. And they could go prove me wrong. I mean, that top line, who knows? They can go do anything. But I do have concerns about them. But I think Montreal makes it, Scotty.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, we're going to take it's not even a break. I'm just going to throw in our little DoorDash conversation. I know this is something warm and near and dear to your heart.
I'm a dedicated dasher.
That's it. DoorDash is the proud sponsor of the Nation Network of podcasts, restaurants, and more delivered right to your door. What's your go-to, Mike? What's if I'm coming to dinner at the McKenna household and what's coming to the front door?
Well, if we're making it easy, we've got A1 Chinese about 2 miles down the road.
Nice.
And we've got it on speed dial, basically our order. And that's our standard dasher. We've got my kids, they love the generic sesame chicken.
Yes.
Sweet and sour chicken, pork lo mein. And then I vary it up. Sometimes I'll go mushu pork. Sometimes I'll go sacha beef, Hunan chicken. I'm all over the place, Scotty, but everybody else in the family seems to be very streamlined in what they like and what they want to have for dinner. But that's the nature of having 5 and 8-year-old kids, right? You've been there before, Scott.
True that. Good stuff. Well, as we mentioned, we're going to have Bill Guerin come and join us in a bit. But before, I can tell you one of the things last night, Mike, I mean, I love the Kraken jersey. I love the logo. I love it all. It was still a bit jarring to see Mark Giordano wearing the C, and it's not the red and black and white of the Flames. And I remember sitting down with Mark, and I actually was in Raleigh, but that breakout year with the Flames, and people were like, holy cow, how good is Mark Giordano? And to me, I will always think of him as a Flame. But how important is it to have a guy like Giordano to wear the first C for a team like Seattle? Because I don't know whether you think the role of the captain has changed over the years or not, but to me, he's the perfect guy to have that role in Seattle.
I think that him being the captain there is more predicated on the fact that he was perfect for it than them needing somebody. Right. And I'm firmly of the belief that every NHL team needs a captain. I'm going to have a piece coming out on Daily Faceoff later this week about it. Hockey works best in the locker room with a benevolent dictatorship. You need to be able to look at one face and hear one voice when it hits the fan. Yeah. I've been in locker rooms previously where you've got two warring factions of players that think they're the captain, and they're both wearing A's. And when things went wrong, players are looking at one guy, somebody's looking at the other guy. The players are looking at each other going, are you going to talk? Am I going to talk? How much are we supposed to talk? It doesn't work. Yeah. And I've been in locker rooms with some amazing leaders. Jamie Langenbrunner, captain in New Jersey. Yeah. Shane Doan, captain in Arizona. Jamie Benn, captain in Dallas. Every single one of these leaders, these captains, when you walk in that locker room as a player, you know that they're the leader. To me, that's the definition of a captain. And that's what's happened in Seattle with Mark Giordano. Yeah. He walked in the room. He's got a gravitas to him. He's been a captain in the league previously. He's still a top-end player. He's a player that works hard, that defends, that plays offensively, that can communicate. Communication aspect is so important, and it does go to coaches and management, but it's more to your teammates. You need to be in the locker room more than you're in the coach's room. And I think Giordano's somebody that's so well respected. It was an easy choice for them. And, I think you also look at the Golden Knights, for example. They came in, they did not name a captain right away. And realistically, Derek Englund was the de facto captain of that team. Yeah. But he didn't wear the C. Is he going to be here? Is he going to retire? Questions. Leadership by committee. I hate that term. I don't think 5 assistant captains equals 1 captain. I don't. I think it muddies the waters. And I think for Vegas, it actually hurt them. I think they named Mark Stone captain about 6 or 8 months too late. I think everybody in that locker room knew he was the guy early in his first full campaign with the Vegas Golden Knights 2 years ago. That would have been the 2019-20 season. Right. But they didn't name him. They didn't want to do it in season. And I can understand that. And I can understand as an expansion team that you want to have some leeway and find the right person. And you want to have the glitz and the glamour of it at the start of the year. But Scotty, how many times have we seen it where a team gives the keys to a player as their captain because they signed a long-term contract? Yeah. Well, how do you feel about that?
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the whole, it strikes me that it's not a symbolic, well, it is symbolic, but it's not just you are
the face of the franchise when you wear that C. Yeah, you are the captain and the goalie. Those are your faces of the franchise. Right.
It is not a hollow designation, or it shouldn't be. But it strikes me that for teams, the Rangers are interesting. Okay, mm-hmm. Where does that lie? And Jargalan, of course, it was in Vegas to start with. You don't want to foist something on someone when they're not ready for it. I remember when Sidney Crosby was made captain. I believe that was under Michel Therrien in the second year, and you knew it was going to happen. And you know what? I think it worked out perfectly. I mean, Jonathan Toews, again, named a captain mm-hmm. at a very, very early age.
But those are guys that you would look to immediately and go, yeah, these are captain material people.
Right.
Right. I don't think anybody looked at Oliver Ekman-Larsson and went, this guy has to be the next captain of the Arizona Coyotes after Shane Doan. And I love Oliver Ekman-Larsson.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you're right on Vegas. I think, again, from the outside, I thought it looked like a team that wanted for a defined leader in the moments in the playoffs the last 2 years, frankly. And and maybe it'll be different this year with Mark Stone designated and now in the role that he was maybe fulfilling otherwise. I was curious, so do you think being a captain now is different in the sense that it's not just on the ice, sort of performing and stepping up and keeping players ready to play and all those things, but it also strikes me that being a captain now, especially with the youthfulness in the NHL, is making sure that that players are, that their mental health is okay, and that they have strong connections with people on the team and those kinds of things. Or has it always been that way, do you think?
I think you make a great observation in that it has shifted. The captain used to be an ass kicker a lot of the time. Yeah. Come in and you don't like what somebody's doing, you slap them around in the in the players' lounge. I've been in locker rooms where the captain literally had another teammate in a chokehold at one point because he was watching monster trucks or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, this was the insanity of hockey 10 or 12 years ago at times. But I think it's changed so much because now and it's just the course of humanity, I think, that we're in. But captains now really have to have some humility and some caring aspect to their teammates. They need to be the ones that invite everybody over for dinner, that round up the troops, not just for the fun committee, but to make sure everybody's safe when you're doing it. Because nowadays you really have to watch out for one another. And, everything's on blast. It's all on social media. And you need somebody with experience to be able to tell everyone when to watch out, when you can have fun, when it's a safe space. Yeah. And that's hard to do if you're 21 or 22 years old in the league, because you may understand on the ice what you need to do. You might work hard. You might kill yourself in the weight room. You might do everything you need to do, but you don't have that experience of playing in the NHL for 5 or 6 years and knowing the pitfalls of at home and on the road, because they are there. And I think Crosby was somebody who was way ahead of his time in terms of maturity, and Taves as well. I always get concerned when I see young captains handed the keys right away. And again, a lot of times it's when it comes from ownership instead of management, that's when I'm nervous. When ownership looks at it as saying, I just spent this much money on this person, this has got to be my captain. That's a problem, because you can't fool the guys in the locker room. The guys in the locker room know who they want to lead them and who should lead them. And it's also hard for fans, Scotty. Like, how many times have we had the hypothetical articles we've seen about our comments from fans now on social? Why isn't he captain?
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, we just went through, it was a big, the big deal of the captaincy being stripped from Jack Eichel. And I get it, but it's still it's a dramatic moment. I remember in San Jose, and Patrick Marleau had the C taken away, and, ultimately goes to Joe Pavelski. And, it just, it is important. It is important. And I think you're right. Whether you're a fan or a coach or a teammate, that's a meaningful thing. If you walk in the door with that C on your jersey, I think 100%. It is important. So, all right, my friend, as promised, we're going to chat with Bill Guerin of the Minnesota Wild and Team USA. All right, everybody, as promised, joined now by Minnesota Wild GM and also the assistant GM of Team USA for the 2022 Olympics, Bill Guerin. Bill, talk about me. Do you miss me? Because as people may know, I spent most of a week in the Minnesota Wild draft war room leading up to free agency in the draft, the expansion draft, and I haven't got any texts or emails asking my advice since I left, and I'm frankly a bit surprised.
No, we do miss you. We absolutely do miss you. You know what? Our rides into the office every morning were the best ones I had. I miss it. We'll have to bring you back soon. You're a special assignment guy, Burns. You're a special assignment guy. That's very important.
I've been called a lot of things, and if it's special assignment, that's not the worst of them. So, but so Mike and I've been talking. Of course, we're a day into the new NHL schedule and how exciting it is for opening night. And the Wild, of course, will start on the road and with a couple of games against Anaheim and LA. But I'm curious, you're relatively new to the GM game. You've been an executive for a number of years, starting in Pittsburgh. How is it different when you get ready for game one than when you were a player? You're a 2-time Stanley Cup champion as a player. What's the difference as an executive? Is it, what's the vibe on that side of the ledger as you start a new season?
Well, the first thing is you don't get to play. But you do get, kind of like the butterflies going again in your stomach, and like you get that the excitement is here, even though I don't get to play anymore. I'm excited. I'm excited to see what our team can do and what we've worked hard for all summer long, all off season long to put together. Let's get it going. Let's see what kind of noise we can make. And that's an exciting time for me.
It's kind of interesting to think about when you look at the pass that we have. It's not a big pass, but it has been crossover previously. And Scotty already talked about the relationship that you guys have together. Bill, I think you and I first crossed paths in training camp in St. Louis the season you played there, but we got a nice picture from my first game of my NHL career. First one I ever played was in Long Island. You're on the ice for the Islanders. I came in relief, but the fun part was, for me at least, we go to Tampa Bay. My first win and shutout was against your club. And, you played 1,263 games in the NHL, not counting playoffs. How many of those singular games can you remember? Because you fought Ryan Malone that game, and I'm curious at the memory level that somebody like yourself that played so many games has, if you could even pinpoint, that one game from late in your career, or any other game for that matter, that really stands out to you.
Yeah, I actually remember that game well. I remember that moment because Sean Bergenheim was being a little pain in the neck out there, and Bugsy took offense to it, but Bergie didn't fight, and I was standing right there. So that happened, and
amazing.
You know what? It's funny. I think just like anything else through your life, there's probably like trigger points. Is there, a song or a smell or something that will trigger your mind and bring you back to a specific game. But yeah, I mean, there are a lot of games and a lot of great memories, and don't remember them all, but
sure.
Kind of like I said, there's, if you see video too, you're like, oh man, yeah, that happened. I now I remember that.
So as a general manager now, and obviously evaluating players throughout the entire league, do you still have those same types of trigger points where a certain memory of a shift of one player will stick in your mind and make you dig deeper on them?
Yeah, I think when I was doing player development, or I was an assistant GM and I was out seeing more games, and just the last couple of years, I haven't really been able to watch a ton of like scouting games or anything like that. You could see a player and you might see something in him, like some sort of trigger, something that he did in one shift that will make you like that player. And then you kind of have to keep going back to him and back to him and back to him to make sure that you're not just relying on that one shift or that one moment. And that goes for our own players as well. You have to put a lot of time in and watching these guys day in and day out to make sure that, well, something that they did really, really well isn't just a one-time thing, or something that they did poorly wasn't just a one-time thing. So it's all a matter of like repetition and just seeing players and making sure you're, kind of backing your initial thought up.
Yeah. I mentioned, you won 2 Stanley Cups as a player, one early, one late. You were part of multiple cup winning teams in Pittsburgh as an executive. When you look at this Wild team, this is the first training camp and the first full season now without veteran guys like Ryan Suter and Zach Parise, who both were bought out. It's a big bold move by the Minnesota Wild to do that. But I wonder, when you think about culture and you think about chemistry and what you want to build with that team, do you go back to moments as a player, or maybe when you first started as an executive in Pittsburgh and understood the feel and try and replicate that, or can you? To me, it sounds like, is it a snowflake thing where it's completely different every single time, or are there things that you say, you know what, we can build this foundation, and I believe these are the players who can do it for us?
Well, I think it's a bit of the snowflake thing, but it can happen, and it does happen. I think the most important thing is that you have your core values and your criteria for what you want, and not just your team, but what you want in your players, what type of people you want, what type of players you want. You have to do your due diligence on each and every guy, on what type of teammate he is, what type of character he has. You put that together, and hopefully it kind of meshes and it creates something special. I do think that culture, I'm a big culture guy. Yeah. And culture has a lot to do with it, in that you can, if you have a good culture, strong culture, something that is positive and strong, you can absorb a lot of different things. And it'll be okay. So I really believe in the people that we've put in place. And it really seems like right now that things are going very well. Now, the key is that you can have your culture and all the good guys and everything that feels good right now has to turn into results on the ice.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing. Yeah. And you know what, too, like, I'll go back and just say this, like, you don't want everybody can't be the same either.
Yeah.
You know, you can't have all rah guys. You can't have all quiet guys. You know what? One of the guys on the team might be a little edgy. You know, he might say some things that puts people on edge, but that's okay. Like I said, that culture can absorb that, and you need that. You can't have everybody just being the same. You know, you need a lot of different types of people.
At what point in your playing career did you kind of realize that about the dynamic of a locker room? You know, because obviously as a player, that's what's going to lead you into what you believe is your core values in management. Yeah,
early on. I mean, because I went to New Jersey and we had such great leadership. We had, such great veteran guys: Bruce Driver, Scotty Stevens, Kenny Danico, John McClain.
And varied personalities in there too.
Yeah. But then we also had Stefan Richer, who was his own guy. And then we had, one of my favorite teammates of all time is Claude Lemieux. And Pepe would say whatever was on his mind. It didn't matter who you were. And he rubbed a lot of guys the wrong way at certain times, but we would all take him in a heartbeat to be on our team in crunch time. And that's kind of what I'm talking about. We couldn't all be like, can't all be milk drinkers, can't all be beer drinkers, can't all be, the same guy. You need a lot of different personalities. And it takes a strong culture to let all those things mix together.
Talking about culture, I'm not sure that everybody expected Dean Evason to remain as head coach of the Minnesota Wild. He's an assistant coach. He's been a head previously with the Milwaukee Admirals in the American League. I have friends that coached alongside him and played for him that all have really good things to say. But I think it was kind of seen as something of a bold move to keep him in power. What made you decide that Dean Evason was the right person to lead your team as head coach?
There are a couple things, and I didn't know Dean. Excuse me. I didn't know Dean well at all when I first got this job. And the one thing that I did like about him is that we were going to do a search after. But the guy that I was going to be looking for had experience with younger players, experience with minor league players, willing to play younger players, willing to play guys up from the American Hockey League. And Dean checked every one of those boxes, because when we were in Pittsburgh, I think one of the best things that happened to us was Mike Sullivan was in Wilkes-Barre. So when he came up to Pittsburgh, there are a bunch of young players in Wilkes-Barre that he believed could play in the National Hockey League. So he wasn't afraid to play them. That paid such huge dividends for. If we don't get those young players in our lineup in Pittsburgh, I guarantee we don't win those cups.
Yeah.
So in talking to Dean and going through everything, he has the courage to do that. He has the belief in those guys because he spent time in the Western Hockey League. He spent time in the American Hockey League. He spent time in the NHL. He played in the NHL. And he's got all this, just these different areas of experience. And the other thing I like about him is that he's got guts. He's not afraid to make hard decisions. And he's empathetic to a player's, feelings and situations where he'll spend time with them. Or it's not just like, you're not playing tonight, go skate. It's, hey, you're not playing tonight. This is why. This is what we're going to do moving forward. He's kind of an open book. So there's a lot to like about Dino.
Is your relationship with Dean different than you thought it was going to be, or has it evolved, in the time that he's been there? Because it strikes me that's having that relationship flourish is critical to success. If you coach and GM, absolutely. I don't know if you have to be pals, but you must have to have some simpatico going on.
Yeah, we do. Well, he's my golf game's gotten better because that's the only place I can track him down is the golf course. So I have to be out there with him sometimes. But no, our relationship has really grown, and we have we have very good communication. We see a lot of the same things the same way. As for recalls and younger players and moving in a different direction and how we get players going, but we also challenge each other. We don't agree on everything, but I think we're both open-minded people and we listen to each other, and there's some give and take in the relationship too. Hey, look, I'll listen to you on this one thing, but I really think on this other thing, let's try it this way. And he's really good with that.
We're going to let you go, but I would be remiss if we did not ask you about Team USA. And you have a long history wearing the red, white, and blue. People may not remember, you played in one of the greatest best on best tournaments of all time, the winning team in 1996, the World Cup of Hockey. And now as assistant GM of Team USA, after the NHL took the 18 Olympics off, this is a brand new landscape in terms of best on best, and especially for Team USA, where some of the brightest stars their first ever chance to play in this kind of tournament. I think of Austin Matthews and Seth Jones, and you go down the list. What's the process been like for you at this stage, and maybe how does it move forward for you as you get closer and closer to having to name Team USA for the Beijing tournament?
Well, it's a huge honor to be involved. I'm having a blast working with Stan Bowman and John Van Beesbrook, and it's just to be involved at this level of management is, it's just great. I mean, I'm having a lot of fun, and this is important. And I feel like right now we have such a great talent pool to choose from. We can not just compete with anybody, we can beat anybody. And that's the goal, is to bring home a gold medal. And I think this generation of players has such a great opportunity to do that. And man, it's just really exciting. And the selection process will not be easy. There are the obvious names, but there are so many other names that we know that can contribute. It's just going to be hard drawing the line on certain guys.
So do you have to have a shared vision then on what that team looks like and how you're going to play? I mean, I think sometimes in the past, these tournaments, teams have said, well, how do we beat Canada? So let's build ourselves to beat Canada. Or like, how important is it to have your own identity and say, I don't care who we play, this is how we're going to play. This is what our identity is going to be. And I think in many ways, that's what happened in 2010 But how do you achieve that?
No, hey, look, we're the United States of America. We just have to worry about ourselves. You know what? We have to build our team to play against everybody. Listen, Stan's the general manager. This team is going to be built with his vision. I support him. Mike Sullivan as our coach will have a lot of input. But Stan is a GM, and you know what? He's got a great vision of what this team can be and how we want to play. But we're gonna focus on us and our game and our players.
Good stuff.
Scotty, what are we going to wager on this? You're the Canadian out of this talk. I'm the American sitting here.
My friends call me. They call me the ugly American or the angry. I got a U.S. passport.
All right.
There you go.
You're coming around, Scotty. We appreciate that.
Anyway, Bill, thanks for taking the time. Good luck this season. And listen, if you need anything on my end, you still have my cell and my email. Just, let me know.
Absolutely. I'll let you know. Special assignment. Thanks for having me on, you guys. I really appreciate it.
All right. I've known Billy a long time, and it's always such a treat, back to when he was a player, Mike, and he was just unflinchingly honest and open to, talking not just about what was happening in that, here and now, in Pittsburgh, for instance, but to talk the game and to talk what was important. And I'm not surprised that he's already carving out a name for himself as an NHL GM. So
I'm not either. I look at his, not just his playing career, but what he's done to impact the game. There's a lot of people that really look up to him, and it's not surprising that he's in the role that he is. And a lot of it comes down to those relationships he's built. And, 2 years ago, or last year, maybe it was, I'm in the elevator in Vegas for a Golden Knights game, and he sees me and, hey, great career, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, man, I was an absolute pigeon. How do you even remember me? We went in training camp. We played a couple games against one another. We had dinner once at Hilton Head at the Board of Governors meetings of the American Hockey League, but I never expected those things, and when somebody goes out of their way to recognize that shows you the type of person they are and how they run things. That culture that's going on in Minnesota is completely different than it's been.
Yeah.
And Billy Guerin is the reason why that's happened.
Yeah. Well, I'm, as you know, most of my stories are about me, but, having spent that time in Minnesota during the draft, the expansion draft, the lead up to free agency, and we didn't ask Bill or didn't mention him, but, he's brought in veteran guys. Ray Shero is part of that staff there who built the Stanley Cup winner in Pittsburgh in 08. Well, final in 08, winner in 09. Randy Sexton is there. Mm-hmm. A lot of guys with experience. But what I found interesting during that week.
Can we just real quick? Let's mention. Go Slew. They're both St. Lawrence guys, Ray Shero and Randy Sexton. So you got some brain power there.
Oh, you got a ton of brain power. But what I came away with, and it goes to your point, is that when there was lots of debate about the players, and this is a team because of the buyouts of Parise and Suter, that they're going to face some difficult cap decisions moving forward. Mm-hmm. And that's already on the table there. But when push came to shove and names are being bandied about, and I like this player, I don't like it, that's Bill Guerin's show. And when it came time to end a discussion or make a decision or move on, it was unequivocally Bill Guerin's voice that carried. And I'm with you. I think that is a very different team. That Central Division is going to be very tough, but I think they're going to be right in the mix all the way through it. So. Yeah,
they pushed Vegas to the limit last year. I actually thought that they were a bigger threat than Colorado was, and they went to 7 games with the Golden Knights. The Wild are constructed in a really tight way. They play any style you need, but they play hard. Losing Suter and Soucy is going to be a hit on the back end, but they replaced him with Goligoski and Kulikov and Merrill. They backfilled nicely there for the pieces they lost. And again, it's about culture. You bring in good guys that people want to be around. And wasn't it funny, Scotty, how we listened to Billy talk about how Dean Evason had the guts to make decisions?
Yeah.
They're in lockstep here. You've got 2 guys that aren't afraid to make a decision that's going to ruffle feathers or that's going to be bold when they feel is right. And that's living in the moment. That's how you build a winner, man. You can't be hesitant in this game as a manager, as a coach.
Yeah. Well, my friend, I'd like to think that we were building the culture here at the Suitcase and the Scribe, but it is time to bid adieu for this, our second episode. We'll do it again next week. As always, good work by you, and can't wait to do it again.
Can't either. Till next time.
Indeed.
Thanks for listening to The Suitcase and the Scribe, a member of the Nation Network of Podcasts and delivered by DoorDash. Make sure you hit the subscribe button to never miss an episode.